Coming up next on Another View, the first Another View Roundtable of 2013. Today's topics: gun violence prevention, the president's plan, and did the NRA go too far with its latest ad? Former Defense Secretary Colin Powell on the Republican Party and race. And the movie Django Unchained. Is it entertainment or an impolite spoof on a serious subject? Roger Chesley, Carol Pretlow, Bill Thomas, and Will LaVeist are here with no shortage of opinions. Plus, we have a surprise guest to join us. The Another View Roundtable is Unchained, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. We've got a lot to talk about with our Another View Roundtable, so let's get right to it. Please welcome Roger Chesley, columnist for the Virginian-Pilot, and you can read his columns every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Hi, Roger. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Barbara. Good to be back with you.
Glad you're here. NSU Professor of Political Science, Ms. Carol Pretlow. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Barbara.
How you doing?
New Year.
Journalist, talk show host, and author Will LaVeist. His book is called Fired Up: How to Win When You Lose Your Job. Hi, Will.
How you
Happy
doing?
New Year. Glad to have you back.
Always a pleasure.
And our community activist, Mr. Thomas, is on his way. He should be here shortly. But we also have a very special guest with us today joining us, and that is Congressman Bobby Scott of the 3rd Congressional District. Welcome to the show.
Robert, it's good to be here.
Oh, we are so happy to have you, and we're really happy to have you join the roundtable discussion because, as you know, it can get quite lively.
We got to upgrade. We got to upgrade today. Huh?
Okay, let's get started. So Wednesday, President Obama revealed his gun violence prevention plan with congressional actions and executive actions, including criminal background checks for all gun sales, reinstating the ban on assault weapons that was in effect from 1994 to 2004, limiting ammunition magazines to 10 rounds, financing programs to train more police officers, first responders, and school officials on how to respond to active armed attacks. Those were some of the highlights. Your reaction. Well, first of all, Congressman, since we have you here, why don't we let you start with what you think?
Well, thank you. The Congress has set up, at least the House has set up a task force to deal with the reaction to Newtown, and I serve as one of the co-chairs of that task force. And you went through the president's recommendations, including the assault weapons ban, limit the number of clips. Mm-hmm. The one thing that's consistent throughout this is the huge magazines, 15, 20. The the Aurora, Colorado shooter had a clip a magazine that had 100 bullets in it, and you wonder, after the first 10 bullets, I mean, the only reason you need a magazine of that size is to kill a lot of people quickly, and so many people have looked at the size of the magazine as at least as critical as the weapon itself. The Gabby Giffords shooter had essentially a handgun with a huge clip on it and was able to get off many rounds in just a few seconds. Mm-hmm. In addition to the gun safety, the mental health. I mean, all of them have undiagnosed or untreated mental health problems. But one of the things we have to recognize is Dewey Cornell is a forensic psychologist at University of Virginia. Reminds us that if your school shooting prevention program begins when the shooter shows up at the door, it's too late. You have to deal with violence generally, mental health generally, and there are a lot of things that we can do to reduce violence. The Attorney General issued a report that came out just a matter of days before the shooting that talked about the problems associated with children exposed to violence. Obviously, the way to reduce those problems is to reduce violence generally. And if you look at his recommendations, it's all early identification of problem children and getting them services early. All of these shooters, if you look back There were symptoms. In Columbine, you had the young men walking around the school in black trench coats. I mean, shouldn't somebody have said, can't we talk and try to deal with it before they show up at the door with military assault weapons?
Mm-hmm. Let me welcome Bill Thomas. Hi, Bill. Happy New Year to you. We're glad you were able to make it. I know you came through lots of traffic and snow and everything else to get here to join us.
And the angels and devils in Richmond as the General Assembly's in session. So, as Congressman Scott will understand, it's budget amendment week, so we had to make sure that was done before we left.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. Thanks so much
lovely.
for being
Happy
here.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. So I'm opening it up for everybody, though, but is anyone surprised that there's all this issue, all this prevention talk, et cetera, when within the African American community there has been, as we talked about last month, killing after killing after killing, particularly of African American males against African American males, Roger?
Yeah, it is a shame, I think, that it took a tragedy of these very young children dying, which for the tragedy of it all is still a very rare incident to have something like this to happen at elementary school, at middle school, or high school, when we know there is so much that goes on every single day in this country in which people either die from homicides or suicides at a handgun. And I think one of the craziest things that I saw in the proposals is that the president has to say something to the effect of, look, a research organization like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention should be allowed to do research into the causes of gun violence. I mean, why does that have to be an executive action on his part? That should be allowed. That should be unequivocal. We should be able to find out what's causing it, what are the links, what are the correlations. And it's just crazy that the gun lobby in this country has been so effective of doing something that seems to me something you would want to have in the first place.
Bill?
Hey, hi.
I see your head going over there.
No. Actually, Congressman Scott and I have been on this for 25 years. Instead of spending all this money for the prisons and locking the folks up and getting them in jail, he's always advocated, let's get these kids when they're young. Let's try to get them some values. Why spend $40,000 a year to lock somebody up at 13 when you determine, since they're uneducated and illiterate by the 6th grade, how large your prisons are going to be? I think that I don't think a gun is inanimate. I think that this is a bigger, deeper problem. And what depresses me, and has depressed me for the past 25 years since I lived in these neighborhoods and saw, when I moved in these neighborhoods maybe 18 years ago, 57 African Americans had died in the city of Norfolk. And I lived in Ghent, and I said, this is outrageous. What it's got to be something better than this. Mm-hmm. And I just think there's other things that has to be done. I think that we have to look at prevention, and I'm agreeing with that, but I don't think these laws or these things are going to do anything. I think the money should get down to the state and to the cities, and the city should be able to do things to improve the hope and value of some kids. Unfortunately or fortunately, I had a discussion with some kids who came home early from Hampton to go back to school, and all these things had just happened. And so we were over, I was monitoring it because there didn't have anybody there. And this discussion came up, and I was very shocked at what they were telling me. They were talking about... So the
young people were talking about the guns and the shooting? Yes,
they were talking about individual responsibility. They were talking about, in some cases they needed to have and be armed. So I was kind of surprised by that. But lastly, my last comment is the most distressing thing. Those 20 precious young babies that passed away and died in Connecticut is horrible. It's just, there's no excuse for it. But to see the uproar and all of this retrofitting over 20 babies, precious, lovable white kids dying, and our kids, 10 died in Chicago that very weekend. The kids can't go to school safe. So I just see that, again, is what I talk about America. I said it's institutionalized racism. I mean, it's just the fact that when it's them, it matters. When it's us, when Congressman Scott's on the difference that we have, but this one we don't have a difference on, when he's been pleading with others like him some sensible, reasonable approach to this, nobody hears it. They'll call him a liberal, they call him this, they call him that, but then when the same thing he's saying now is what he's been saying. So all I'm saying is the fact, and I'm just not doing it because I know him, because we have differences, but on this case, we have been 100%. Let's do early prevention. Let's let the people on the streets, like Congressman Scott and others that have truly concerns about this, deal with the problem. Mm-hmm. Not the NRA, not Vice President Biden, not President Obama, who shed tears over those folks. That broke my heart. When I also know that kids that look like us and no tears have been shed.
Will, Carol?
Well, I agree with all of you, but I think, again, causes are very, very important. As we look at the African American community, though, everything is about promotion and PR and who gets attention. And if the masses are getting attention and we are not, we should be looking at the media outlets and say, why aren't you reporting this? Why aren't you giving us more information about this? Because that's the job of the media, to expose us.
Well, let's talk to the media, Will.
Media is a business. This is a common cycle, and we see the cycle being worked the same way. What all has been said is correct. What Bill just said about no tears being shed over black children dying, I would submit to you that when Congressman Scott's colleague Gabrielle Giffords, when she was shot, there was little done after that.
No, there was nothing done.
So that says something about our culture when a member of Congress can be, nearly assassinated in that way, and still we talk and then it dies down, and then nothing happens and goes away again. So one of the things that I would like to see is a paradigm shift, a nuance on this, where you get the NRA and the gun advocates taking the lead on this and saying, okay, we want to maintain the Second Amendment. That's not even on the table to try to disrupt and destroy that. How are we going to have a society where black children do not have access to guns like that to illegally to kill each other in the way that they're doing, nor people who have mental health issues can get access to guns with all of these high-powered magazines to kill people in mass like this? And hopefully also they would join forces with the mental health community to talk about this issue of mental health, not in the sense of these are just crazies getting access to guns, but actually looking at what is going on in these communities, because there's a lot of people that have mental health issues that are functional. And I would submit to you that a lot of what's happening with our young people in the black community is a mental health issue in a way that they are naturally reacting and killing each other.
Congressman?
In terms of mental health, there are challenges in how to deal with that. You don't want people who are not able to fulfill their responsibilities of handling firearms, and you want to deny them access to firearms. But you got to be careful about that, because if you let somebody know if they seek professional help, they'll lose their right to get a firearm. They might not seek help, and you want as much help as possible in those circumstances. So you don't want to set up something that's actually counterproductive. The other side is, how do you get this information on the background check information? So when you run a background check, you'll know that they're ineligible to have a firearm, and that is very complicated. Of course, most of the transfers of firearms go without any background check at all. The number that's most frequently cited is about 40%, gun show loophole and everything else. But in following Bill's comments, there is legislation pending. Most of the juvenile justice organizations have advocated the Youth Promise Act, which I've introduced, which provides a comprehensive approach to dismantle the cradle-to-prison pipeline, as the Children's Defense Fund describes the present situation, and create a cradle-to-college and career pipeline. And that requires, just in terms of process, get everybody around the table in the neighborhood that has anything to do with children getting in trouble. That's law enforcement, the school system, court services, probation, parole, after-school programs, faith-based community, the business community.
Mental health community.
Mental health, Medicaid. Everybody's got anything to do with children getting in trouble, and come up with an evidence-based comprehensive plan to reduce crime. You put evidence-based in the bill, and you say, why do you have to put that in the bill? And that's so that they won't codify simple-minded slogans and feel-good sound bites,
but
wasting everybody's money
into it.
And we know that these programs, if they're comprehensive, will significantly reduce crime and save a lot more money than they spend. Part of the process, too, is to figure out who's going to save some money. I mean, they had one of these plans that in Richmond where they reduced the number of murders from 19 to 2 over a couple of years. Obviously, the Medical College of Virginia trauma unit saved a lot of money and not having to treat uncompensated medical care. Get everybody who might save some money, Department of Corrections, Medicaid will be saving money because you've got fewer teen pregnancies. Find out who's going to save some money and get them to invest back in. Most of the studies have shown you can save 3, 4, 5 times more than you spend. So if you can get them to kick back a third of their savings, you can continue all of the programs in the comprehensive package. That has significant support. Just about all of the juvenile justice advocacy organizations have specifically mentioned that as legislation that needs to be passed in reaction to Newtown.
Well,
And that's why I say, Barbara, instead of all of the yelling that goes on back and forth between the extremists, why not bring the NRA and say, okay, what is the reason for why you won't get behind something like this that's reasonable?
But hang on.
What is your
But
problem
hang on
with
one
that?
second.
What is your problem with
Let me
that?
make
Go
one
ahead.
other point. One of the problems we have in the discussion is all this cultural things. With what you do in Montana and what you do in Richmond,
They're
Virginia,
two different things.
you're not going to be able to have
Never.
a national plan
Absolutely.
that you can pass that both would vote for. And the Youth Promise Act is designed for the local community to come up with a comprehensive plan for the local community. So you get away from all of that. And everybody who studied it says it's going to save a lot more money than you spend.
hang on, Roger. Go ahead.
And one of the things, we have to understand, why are we as a nation so much worse than so many other Western nations when it comes to violence? I mean, what is it about us? And the biggest thing, the biggest difference seems to be the availability of firearms. That seems to be overwhelmingly the reason why there are so many killings and so many suicides to take place. Yes, I think, as Bill said, we do need to work on values. We do need to work on parenting. But the reason why there is such a drumbeat, a constant drumbeat, I used to hate being, when I was a police beat reporter in Detroit some weeks, because that's all you're doing sometimes was covering homicides. Many of them young people, most of them black, obviously in a mostly black city. And so there is that correlation, and I think we should, as a nation, deal with that more forthrightly.
Well, when you hear stories about how a woman in Newport News recently, who was just buried recently, who went outside to protect her children, and now a 15 and 16-year-old have been arrested for the shooting. Bill?
But see, and here's where I'm going to disagree probably with everybody. I think everybody who wants to own a gun legally and morally and have the proper checks should have a gun. If I want to have a machine gun, an M60 in my backyard,
why do you need a
that is
machine
my
gun,
right.
though?
Because the theory is, from the conservatives think, and I kind of agree with it, I'm not protecting myself from the neighbors. I'm protecting myself. The reason this all got codified in the Constitution was to protect the citizens from the government. And so you may not agree or not agree with that.
Bobby, Scotty, you gonna come after Bill?
No. Actually, Joe Rubin called me up when we were having a debate, and he said, Bill, in 1945, there was a rumor in Hampton Roads that the Germans and the African Americans, Negroes at the time, were going to have a conspiracy, and what they were doing, they were buying ice picks. And the Germans were going to supply the ice picks to the African-American community, and then they were going to have a big riot in Virginia, and they were going to go out and kill all the white people with the ice picks. The Virginia General Assembly then, or somebody passed a law saying you cannot get an ice pick without getting registered. So it really doesn't matter. What we have, in my sense, and it's not so much slogans and things like that, we have a tremendously spiritual breakdown in our community when somebody can take another person's life. Now, my son has been placed on the ground in a project with 3 of his white friends and guns pointed at their heads saying, give it up, or are we going to kill you? So I understand that. So I totally understand it. He had enough sense because he lived in the community to get up and say, well, you're not going to do anything to me. If you could do, you're going to get a stand up. They got away from it just by luck. But when we have these kids that have zero values, they have no religious context whatsoever, no matter what it is, that their life is everything and my life is mine, then I actually need a gun to protect myself. I have guns. My kids are not going to go out and rob and kill somebody. So I'm saying is the fact that it is not the gun, and there's a balance between all of this stuff. You're not going to change the NRA. They're not going to change even when one of their own members got killed. So what we have to do is find a way to bring people to the table, as Congressman Scott has been trying to do for the past 6 years that I know of, and take these pieces, take the $10 million that Governor McDonnell is trying to do to renovate a prison someplace in Virginia, take that $10 million and put an investment in what he is talking about and just stop it. Let's take responsibility for our own community and leave it to other people.
Okay, Carol.
Okay. my concern is that if you say everybody's going to be armed, what is to prevent this from being shoot out at the OK Corral?
Morals and values.
Well, you just said that some of them don't have that. So I'm on it at Norfolk State University, and I'm teaching, and somebody gets mad with me and pulls out a gun or shoots somebody else. You've got to figure out. You have to have some boundaries. You can't just be everybody.
And the other part of it too, though, I throw this out to you all, is some of the rhetoric that has been being said throughout this whole discussion. I want to play the ad from the NRA that came out this week.
Okay.
Are the president's kids more important than yours? Then why is he skeptical about putting armed security in our schools when his kids are protected by armed guards at their school? Mr. Obama demands the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, but he's just another elitist hypocrite when it comes to a fair share of security. Protection for their kids and gun-free zones for ours.
Well, Will, my first question is, first of all, sometimes when I hear this discussion about armed police officers in schools and, we need this and so forth, have these people never been to an inner city school where they have to go through metal detectors, where there are armed police officers already in the school? When did this become a new phenomenon?
It goes back to what I said, is that's really not about being new, or that's simply about being a distraction.
Be candid. When white folks die, something happens. Come on.
Well, come on now. I mean, you had your say.
Let's have one.
And what I'm saying is that as long as we allow ourselves to get distracted by that kind of rhetoric, or whether we should be allowed to have machine guns or not, you are never going to get to the part of what Congressman Scott is trying to get at, and what people in the mental health community are trying to get at is, okay, how do we learn as a society how to function while having these things in our presence? Otherwise, it's just going to always be a distraction that's going to end up in this back and forth rhetoric, and then you end up getting exhausted and tired and never accomplishing anything.
So, Congressman Scott, how do you get past the rhetoric?
Well, I think the ad tells you more about the NRA than it does about the issue, and we'll just leave it like that.
Okay.
But we have had testimony before the Judiciary Committee. Dr. John Lott, who has written a book, the title of which tells you what his position is. The title is More Guns, Less Crime. He believes that if more people had firearms shooting at each other, that the crime rate would go down. Most people believe that's absolutely absurd. But a lot of people believe that, and that's what you've got. The idea of armed police officers. Many of the juvenile justice advocacy groups don't like that, because the armed police officers tend to channel young people into the criminal justice system, where they develop records, and the trajectory of somebody going into the criminal justice system is a bad trajectory to be on. They don't save anything. You had armed guards at Columbine High School, at Newtown. The entire episode only lasted a few seconds. And if the armed guard is at the other end of the school, he's useless. The idea that you've got school teachers packing heat, either the weapon is accessible, in which case a child is going to get it and shoot somebody, or it's inaccessible, better known as what good is it? The idea that you can solve these problems dealing with the situation when the shooter gets to the door eliminates the reality that if we're going to do anything about violence, you have to reduce violence generally. That means prevention, early intervention, counseling, and if you're going to pay all this money to have an armed guard in all these schools, and count up the number of school shootings there are and the number of murders that there are, and a lot of people have suggested that a school counselor, a psychologist in all the schools would do a lot more in reducing in protecting our children than an armed guard that may or may not be in the right part of the school when the shooter shows up at the door.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Roger.
I just wish the NRA would say, these are some of the things that we think would be helpful and still would not hurt gun rights for people. The mentality mostly from the organization has been do nothing to
Don't tread on me.
Right.
That's
Don't
it.
do anything that's going to hurt
That's
my side of the
constitutional.
ledger. Do anything else on the other side of the ledger. But don't hurt anything that might impinge in any way on gun rights at any time, anywhere. Period. And that's just not really helpful. That's not really something that reduces the
Not
problem.
when we need to bring
And by
everybody to the
arguing
table.
back and forth doesn't challenge them to ever have to address that. It just allows them to just argue back and
Well,
forth.
final word on this is, according to our friends at the Virginian-Pilot today, the headline reads, "With gun control proposals and news, a run on guns." And they're talking about how many guns have been purchased. That Bob's Gun Shop, for example, has now had to limit the number of bullets to 2 boxes per customer because people were buying cases worth. So,
And there you go.
and there you go. If you're just joining us, we are talking with the Another View Roundtable. We have Roger Chesley, columnist for the Virginian-Pilot, Carol Pretlow, NSU political science professor, our community activist, Bill Thomas, author and talk show host and journalist, Will LaVeist, and our special guest, Congressman Bobby Scott.
Ms. Ham, just before you go, just one comment, please.
Yes, sir.
We talked about solutions sometime last year. Okay, we talked about all these problems. Everybody's got their point of view. Here's a solution right here. The man has legislation in Congress, been presented. One of the things that I've saw that we do as a community, we get into too many things. Why this year can't we just focus on trying to take this little piece, working together, come back a year from today to see if we made any progress on helping him help our community get this legislation passed to the extent where we can make a measurable difference.
Well, to that end, also,
with that.
Congressman Scott, I'll give you a chance. You are hosting a Youth Violence Prevention Summit coming up on the 22nd.
Right, that's
you want to talk to us about
that's
that?
in Washington, D.C. We'll have many experts to speak. Dewey Cornell, who I quoted as saying that your strategy is too late if you wait for the shooter to show up at the door, will be there. Professor Peter Scharf, judge, and another professor and researchers. Sheriff Gabe Morgan from Newport News will be there. And we have a young person from Potomac State University in West Virginia to come and testify. Basically, it takes an academic approach. It's one of the things that's conspicuously missing from most of the discussion. Most people are sounding off in what feels good and what they think makes them safer with no research base to support anything they're talking about. And we need the information as to what works and what doesn't work. There are a lot of these initiatives have been studied and found to be counterproductive. I mean, every study that's been done on trying more juveniles as adults has shown that will increase the crime rate. Scared Straight has shown to be counterproductive. Others, like a nurse visit shortly after, late in the pregnancy and shortly after birth, working with the parents significantly reduces child abuse, which is highly correlated with future crime. Those with nurse visits are on a much better trajectory than those without. Programs that assist reading to make sure that the children can read by the 3rd grade. The teachers say that up to the 3rd grade, children learn to read. After the 3rd grade, they read to learn. If you can't read after the 3rd grade, you're not going to learn after the 3rd grade, and you're headed towards dropping out, which is another problem. You're out in the street doing nothing, getting in trouble. The trajectory you're on after you've dropped out of school is miserable. I saw one study that showed for African American males, high school dropouts 25 to 30, a third of them are in jail today.
I was going to ask, why wouldn't the president tack that on to his proposal? What does it take to get that done? I mean, you can go into his office and put your feet on his table.
Well, I was in the office with the vice president and told him just that.
What's the deal? You know.
All right, let's go.
I mean, what would it take? I mean, to get him to push that.
Well, you're in the media. You ask him.
Exactly.
Well, and I think there's another thing.
Go ahead, Roger.
A lot of what is in the congressman's bill that he's tried repeatedly to get passed, and he's come into the Virginian-Pilot editorial board and talked to us about it before, is that's seen by some people as being soft. That's being seen as social service. That's not being tough on crime. When in reality, you're helping to prevent crime so we don't get to that place, and so that you don't have people in jail, but you have people being productive. And so it just seems counterproductive that it keeps getting shot down to me.
Well, we do have a lot of support, and we have bipartisan support. 2 years ago, I had the majority of the House as co-sponsors, but we couldn't. We were much weaker in the Senate, and so nothing happened. We're starting up again this year, and I think there's significant support for the Youth Promise Act.
Well,
Okay, good. And we'll keep
I
watching
promoted it on my show several times, and so we'll continue to push it.
All right, let's go on to the next topic. Former Defense Secretary Colin Powell on Meet the Press last Sunday took the Republican Party to task on race. Let's listen to the clip.
There's also a dark vein of intolerance in some parts of the party. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is they still sort of look down on minorities. How can I evidence that? When I see a former governor say that the president is shucking and jiving, that's a racial era slave term. When I see another former governor after the president's first debate where he didn't do very well, says that the president was lazy. He didn't say he was slow, he was tired, he didn't do well. He said he was lazy. Now, it may not mean anything to most Americans, but to those of us who are African Americans, the second word is shiftless, and then there's a third word that goes along with it. Birther, the whole birther movement. Why do senior Republican leaders tolerate this kind of discussion within the party?
Miss Political Scientist, will the Republicans listen?
I don't think they will listen because they have a base, particularly in the South, who's very conservative. And the code words are a way of sort of communicating among themselves. And, of course, to those of us who are listening, we know it, but we might not say anything. So I don't think it's going to change.
Roger?
I think they have to change because they saw what happened demographically. The party is in trouble. And if it doesn't change, I think he was saying as much as anything else, the former defense secretary was basically saying, hey, look, we are not going to get the votes that are going to keep us in national office. They might still win some statewide races. They might still win Senate and congressional races. But if we want to be taken seriously nationwide, we've got to do better. And the fact that he even has to say this suggests some of the level of the work that party has to do better by African Americans and Latino Americans.
All right, let's let our resident Republicans speak.
I don't know about all that. I don't know about all that because I've been talking about this and I've written in your paper and in the Daily Press extensive op-ed pieces about this for years.
People aren't listening to you.
No,
Bill.
they don't. And so I moved on. I mean, I'm not tied to the Republican Party as such. As I see it, from a personal involvement with those folks, is that the fact that the grassroots are pretty good. It's been the recent leadership. They're stupid. They're ignorant. They're racist. And they just don't get it. They're not smart. They're just not smart. You know, if you look at smart politicians like Ronald Reagan and you look at first Bush and you look at even the second Bush, they came with intelligence. These folks that are in our leadership position now aren't very smart. Sarah Palin, and I'll just tell you, and I'm not saying it to be derogatory, you have to have smart, principled folks to believe in their positions that can articulate provisions and keep people on the outliers outside of this thing. Mm-hmm. Karl Rove, I knew Karl Rove 30 years ago. He was up doing Republican stuff up in Northern Virginia. Mm-hmm. These people aren't very smart. And they don't have I'm a second generation postgraduate graduate. And the folks that are leading the party are just absolutely not smart. The grassroots are. They don't believe this. I've had more conservative people that are white come to me and said, Bill, what they're doing to you in Hampton University at Proton Center is racist. That's why I can now come out and say it is institutional racism. White folks that are poor, that have the power, that don't have any options, want to keep the power, they do it. And I'm sure there's some of the Democratic Party.
Are you talking about in terms of funding from the state?
Funding anything. It doesn't matter, just common sense stuff. I'm just saying the people in the leadership, and maybe I'm stupid and ignorant as well, but they're right along with me. And they can't revoke because Colin Powell is telling the truth. And that's why he left the party. That's why, and I'll leave it like this. Condoleezza Rice always said, her dad never went to any of Martin Luther King's protests and etc. Because if he would have, he told her, they would not have had a dad. So I'm telling you, these folks aren't very smart. They don't do anything. They don't They don't come to anything. They think President Barack Obama is a stupid idiot, and he's just playing them like a fiddle and getting his way, and that's fine because that's what happens. But at the end of the day, I don't think these people leadership are very smart. The grassroots are good. Sooner or later, they'll wake up.
Congressman.
Well, I think you have to look at the modern Republican Party in the late 60s to 75, 80, where there was a transition in the Republican Party. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, he announced to his staff then that that the Democratic Party had given away the South for generations. And if you just look at the Republicans before then, I mean, you had people like Linwood Holton, supporters of civil rights.
Yes.
But by virtue of their appeal, Richard Nixon to law and order and overt racial appeals, they were able to capture the South, and that became the electoral base for their national party. If you look at their leaders now in the in Congress, most are in the last few years have been many have been from the South. And when you talk about intelligence, as Bill pointed out, when you have people appealing to nonsensical positions, you get a Congress full of people that can't understand that the debt ceiling needs to be increased. Absolutely. You can't find a single anybody who graduated from college with an economics degree that thinks anything good can happen if you don't increase the debt ceiling. And yet you get these people sounding like they know what they're talking about. I mean, with all the words and the sentences, they sound like they string the words together like it's intelligent, saying, no, we don't need to increase the debt ceiling. I mean, that kind of absurdity. I mean, and it's hard to have the discussion because it's so transparently explosive. I mean, you explode the entire economy. Why anybody would think that that's an intelligent thing to do is just beyond me. And it is impossible to hold an intelligent discussion with people that think something good can come out of not increasing the debt ceiling.
You know, but isn't it scary? Does it scare you that it is so hard for you all to have this conversation?
It's up to the Republican Party, since they control the House, to marginalize the people that have those views. And if you listen very carefully, last time they went through this, Senator McConnell in the Senate was talking about using the debt ceiling as an opportunity to extract certain promises, but you listen carefully, it was always with the understanding, of course we're going to raise the debt ceiling. We're just going to use this as an opportunity to have the discussion. These guys are talking like if we raise the debt ceiling. And like I said, nobody that graduated from college with an economics degree would think that anything good could happen with that kind of strategy.
Well, I think that Congressman, what he's essentially saying is that the Republican Party is still courting those old Dixiecrats that ran away from his party that they were happy to get rid of, that in the South, who were dominating, who were against Martin Luther King and who were against change, and now they've come over and they're in the Republican Party, and that the leadership is still caught in a time warp where they're courting them as if that base is going to be what gets them national offices, and they're now paying attention to the demographic changes that are going on in the country, and that the numbers are going against them. And I disagree with them that they're saying that it's about stupidity, not being bright.
Then you're wrong.
I don't think that they're not smart. I think that they're just thinking more about themselves, and they play on people's ignorance to fill their own pockets, to make their own money. And this is why Sarah Palin has gone from just being a governor of Alaska that people barely knew about to being a multimillionaire, and she's quite happy doing that.
All right, we're gonna go down the line.
That's not stupidity. That's smart.
I think there's a difference between being politically smart and being intellectually smart.
We're talking about
when you can't even agree on a certain set of facts, then you have a problem, and that's part of, I think, of the disconnect that's going on in Congress right now.
And when you can't be intellectually or politically smart, and you realize that the other side is, what you do is take these attacks that have nothing to do with the issue and say, okay, they're shucking and jiving, they're lazy, whatever. Then you throw that in and distract people.
Roger cleared it up. I mean, that's the way I see it, and I'm in there. No, they don't understand. They don't understand that there are plenty of people in the African American and Hispanic community that are pro Second Amendment, pro everything. But if they just spit in your face and don't even talk to you, because they can't. They can't. When I go to the meetings, they can't debate me because I'm just saying, you can't deal with this. I don't care about that. Yeah, I want my gun, but at the same time, I don't want people that don't have the tools to liberty, freedom, education, the thing that Congressman Scott's talking about. Then how am I going to hold them accountable? Because I can't. I got to do something about it. And things are going to change. It's not about all that other stuff. The people aren't smart, in my judgment.
Not about what other stuff?
The other stuff about all these, they use those tag words and slogans and things because they don't know what to do. You can't say, I'm going to vote down raising the debt limit. No, daggone well, that's going to hurt everybody.
I think they use those tag limits because that's what's going to keep them in office, and that's what's going to keep them. That's what's going to keep their cash flow coming. That's why they use
those are short-term intellectual things that are going to go away.
Well, that's what they're focused on.
Congressman, go ahead.
You're talking about the debt ceiling. You're also talking, one of the problems we're in, the box we're in, is they keep discussing the budget without using numbers. I mean, Governor Romney said we're going to reduce taxes 20%. We're going to increase defense spending, and the deficit is the biggest problem we've got. I mean, the things just do not conform to fundamental principles of arithmetic. They keep talking about we're going to reduce the size of government with unspecified cuts. The reason they're unspecified is if you actually listed $4 trillion worth of cuts to conform to the $4 trillion tax cut we just passed, people would look and say, "Oh, I don't want a tax cut if that's what you got to cut." Yeah. But it's all unspecified cuts, generalities. Ryan's budget had a $4 trillion asterisk on it. It said it was balanced with a $4 trillion asterisk. That is directions to the Ways and Means Committee to fill a $4 trillion gap. I mean, what kind of that's no budget. The whole the $4 trillion is the goal of the Simpson-Bowles Deficit Reduction Commission was trying to come up with $4 trillion in deficit reduction. The Ryan budget has a $4 trillion asterisk. You know, it does a little budget, but it comes $4 trillion short of anything that can be called balanced.
But he also knows that the people who are going to likely to vote for him are not paying attention to all of those details. What they want to hear is are you going to increase my taxes? No, yes. What are you going to do? And that's what they vote on. So it's not about him being stupid. It's about him understanding what it is that people are going to vote on and what those buttons are.
This is the problem with the budget. People believe that you can balance the budget by cutting taxes and increasing spending. And that's why you can sign these why they enforce these pledges where you got to sign a pledge, I'll never increase taxes. And then you get to, you can't, without significant cuts in Medicare and Social Security, you can't come anywhere close to the $4 trillion in paying for that tax cut, that New Year's Day tax cut that I voted against, and just want to remind people of that because when they cut Social Security and Medicare and everything else that people wanted in order to preserve tax cuts that most people don't even remember getting in the first place, then they'll understand why I voted no.
Here's my point, and it's not stupid. It's about the intelligence piece. I think we both kind of agreed to. My point is, I'm fiercely for the Second Amendment. I'm fiercely for charter schools. But I think I can go in and have a debate with a Democrat on the intellectual values and the principles that I support versus what they are saying is good for America. And it's all good. You don't see that anymore because they can't. See, I believe in certain things, and over the years, and I'm just not saying it because he's here. I remember when I first came here 25 years ago, and I just said, "Hey, look, I'm a Republican. I don't believe anything you Democrats say. You're dumb. You think this and that and the other." Do you know who I used to sit back? Who used to come and talk to me? I didn't even know this man. He'd come over. I think he was he was either a delegate or a senator at the time in the Virginia General Assembly, and he would have discussions with me.
You're talking about Congressman
Scott. And we would have the longest discussion that people would look at him like he's crazy. Why are you sitting over there talking to this guy who's saying all these things?
Because he was trying to convert you.
No. we used to have intellectual conversations about what we agreed with, what we didn't agree with, and then come to some common sense stuff that made sense, like his legislation here. Not all these things about guns. If I don't have one, I can do this and all that stuff.
Congressman Scott could not have voted the way he voted if he was in a conservative district. So at the end of the day, you have to be able to vote either on what you believe or based on what your constituency is going to keep you in office.
Sometimes, arithmetic is arithmetic, whatever district you're in. And I believe if you look, I got 80% of the vote, which is not just the liberal part of the district. I mean,
that's everybody.
That's about everybody. Arithmetic is arithmetic, and at some point, if you're going to do a budget, you ought to at least agree that your proposal will conform to fundamental principles of arithmetic. It will add up. A $4 trillion asterisk budget does not qualify. I mean, if you're going to rate, and when you're doing deficit reduction, everybody's trying to be popular. You cannot be popular when you're doing serious deficit reduction. You're raising people's taxes and you're cutting people's programs, period. And you're making people mad. What we did on January 1st was extended $4 trillion worth of tax cuts and did not. So 99% of the people were not adversely affected and cut not a single program. And so you didn't make anybody mad. And people say, well, your proposal will make people mad. Yes, we're doing deficit reduction. What else is new?
All right, we've got less than 5 minutes. I'm not going to play the clip from Django Unchained because we don't have enough time for the clip.
The D is silent.
The D is silent. The Quentin Tarantino movie that has everybody talking seems to be two camps: those who see it as entertainment and those who see it as irreverence towards the institution of slavery, a mockery. Bill, did you see the movie?
I love history, and I loved it when he was beating the slave overseer with the whip. I stood up and applauded.
So the revenge part of it.
That got
me.
You
stood up and applauded.
We are powerful people, and we can stand up and take care of our women. The part that killed me was when he got the power, he became just as evil as the enslavers. They killed folks for no reason. I mean, it made no sense. It just made no sense to me at all after
now,
that.
Roger, I know you were having real issues about going to see it.
Barbara,
so what did you decide?
I did not want to go see the movie, but I felt
this is a
like
journalist talking.
If I had to talk about it, then I had to see it. Mm-hmm. And as an entertainment, it was entertaining on some levels. It was farce. There were kind of a wink and a nod to Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, to blaxploitation movies of the 70s. It is not history. Let's make sure that everybody understands that. There was nobody black going around with firearms killing at random like this 2 years before the Civil War. I think we would know about that before now. So take a look at Amistad, take a look at documentaries if you want a truer sense of what slavery was all about, and understand that this is slavery. Didn't like all the use of the M-word in it.
That was too much.
I stopped counting after 45, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they said there were 108.
Not surprised.
Actually, in the movie. Carol, what did you think?
Well, I found it entertaining. I found it very long.
Yeah.
I agree with Bill in some respects. So I'm sorry. As an undergraduate, I spent time looking at Nat Turner's Rebellion, and I can't help thinking that when you do evil, why do you expect that it's not going to come back to you? Right. And so, in that respect, even though maybe it was over the top, I was like, okay, good enough for you. You were engaged in something that was dehumanizing and should have been illegal. So what do you expect you're going to get?
Will, did you see it?
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
What'd you think?
It's art, it's entertainment. It's not history. It wasn't intended to be history. I think it was an equal opportunity offender on all sides. If you were white, you saw things to be offended by. If you were black, you saw things to be offended by. And that Stephen character certainly exists in the black community today. Right in this community.
The Stephen character. Very quickly, describe for our audience who may not have seen Django, describe the Stephen character.
Oh, Stephen was the Samuel J. Character, who's basically, the house Negro, keeping the other slaves in the house under control and so forth. And it was a very interesting scene where he actually sits down with the master and he's actually sitting and talking, and they're actually engaging like peers.
Yeah,
actually engaging like peers.
Exactly. Because he was the spy. He was the one who kept the house together. Yeah. Did you see it, Congressman?
No, I didn't see
it.
You haven't seen it. Okay.
You might see some of your colleagues. He may see some of his colleagues and some of those characters, boy. Talking loud, saying nothing, keeping black folk down, all that kind of.
Barbara, one thing I would say though, before seeing it and hearing so much about the controversy, I thought it was going to be a lot worse in some respects, and it was not. Some of the things that I'd heard, I think one of the critics was Spike Lee about this. That was not there, and it was so over the top in some respects. It's like, don't take me too seriously. Don't take the movie too seriously in some ways.
It was classic Tarantino in terms of the violence, which some of it I had to close my eyes.
And his rewriting of history in much the same way he did with Inglourious Basterds.
He had that beautiful lady, Miss Washington, there, which I thought I would see more of her and less of the other things. I was truly disappointed in that.
And people should know, again, the original Django character from the Westerns has nothing to do with this whole so that just shows you how he took and
with
really
that,
with
ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. Can you believe it? Thank you, Congressman. Thank you so much for joining the roundtable. We'll have you back anytime you'd like to join us. And we'll be right back.
Humiliation, obligation to my nation. That's what the world is today. The sale of pills are at an all-time high. Young folks walking around with their heads in the sky. Cities are flying.
Welcome back. Next weekend, the Girls with Goals Alliance will host their second annual Opportunity. This organization connects girls between the ages of 9 and 18 with female mentors who uplift, advise, and inspire. This year's keynote speaker is Natalie Hawkins, mother of Olympic gold medalist Gabby Douglas. Just yesterday, our Lisa Godley spoke with Natalie about the importance of mentors in a young girl's life.
Gabby, unfortunately, almost sat this down about 35 seconds ago.
Natalie Douglas knows the importance of mentors. Natalie had to turn the care of Gabby over to a host family hundreds of miles away in Iowa while the teen trained for the Olympics.
I was virtually a single parent, and you can't do everything on your own, and so it's so important to bring other individuals into your circle to partner up with your children to help them get to where they need to be, because one of the things that I always held to was that it really does take a village to help rear children. So many times I see my children receive input from someone else and they'll receive it, and I told them that same thing. And sometimes I think it's just the different delivery that someone can give, that you receive it in a different way.
While the Girls with Goals Alliance connects girls and teens with mentors 25 and older, Natalie says she also supports peer mentoring, something Gabby has just fallen in love with.
I love the fact that there's so many girls that come up to her and say, I look up to you. Can you tell me how you got to where you got to? And can you share with me some insights as to how you kept fighting when things seemed so difficult? And they've shared their stories with her. And I love that she was able to pour into them and say, you have to keep fighting. I never thought that my daughter would wind up being in sort of a mentorship role. And so I just think it's incredibly important that you have that person that you can look up to who can help you find your way in life sometimes.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And you can hear more from Natalie Hawkins Douglas at the Girls with Goals Alliance Opportunity, Saturday, January 26th, from noon until 3 at the Portsmouth Renaissance Hotel and Conference Center. Call 877-252-3677 for ticket information. And I am happy to serve as MC for this event, so I hope you will come on out and join us. Next week on Another View, Soul Food Junkies. The PBS documentary asks the question, is soul food a cultural norm that's killing African Americans? You decide as we talk with the filmmaker Byron Hurt and cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby. Carol, what's going on?
I'm laughing because I am a soul food junkie, and Dr. Newby is my doctor, and my blood pressure.
Dr. Newby is keeping her alive.
And your blood pressure is up and everything.
And he's trying to bring it down.
Beg your pardon?
That football player Notre Dame and his dating. I got on Match.com.
Did you now?
I gotta
Put your headset on so we can hear you.
I don't know if anybody else to hear this.
You got on Match.com and
I
you
better
did,
go check her out and make sure she's real.
For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, Danielle Jenkins, who didn't get a chance to answer the phones today, but she was right there. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.